Now, before you creationists are like, man, that's a slam dunk. You can't prove creation. You cannot prove scientifically, according to the scientific method, that God created the heavens and the earth. Because number one, you and I were not there to observe it. Let's be fair. We were not there to observe it. Now, I hope God recorded it, because I'd love to see that. Get to heaven, God pushes in the tape, says, watch this, y'all. This was stinking cool. Which I think would be even funnier is if God pulled out like a reel-to-reel, something really old, you know, and hey, sit down, you're in the way. Kind of thing, we can't see this. That's funny. Anyway, I wasn't there to observe it. You weren't there to observe it. And so since we didn't observe it, we can't logically measure it. Now, it has been recorded for us in the pages of the Scriptures. The Bible records it for us. But again, we will accept that as true only by faith. And you can't repeat it. I mean, it's definitely repeatable if God wanted to do that. But we're here. So, you know, it's done. But see, that shouldn't be a problem. Accepting things like this by faith shouldn't be a problem for any of us because we do it all the time. For instance, you cannot prove scientifically, you cannot prove that Abraham Lincoln existed scientifically. You cannot prove that his existence as the 16th president of the United States during the Civil War period is scientific fact. Not by the scientific method, you can't. Because none of us observed his existence. We weren't around when that happened. And so we couldn't measure his existence. Now, his existence was recorded, but we're just accepting that by faith. Is that true or not? You say, well, I've seen pictures. How do you know that's a picture of him? How do you know? I mean, that's the picture we've always seen. You know, the tall guy with a long hat, you know, makes him look even taller and everything. You know, and we've heard that he was a tall guy. But how do we know that that's a picture of him? And you certainly can't repeat his existence because he's dead. It's done and over with. So you and I all accept the fact that he was the 16th president of the United States by faith. Have you ever heard anyone say, you know, I really don't think Abraham Lincoln existed? Have you ever heard anybody say when they read a history book, I don't know about that. I got my doubts. No, we accept it by faith, and it's just a history book that somebody wrote and said, this is what we heard happened. Interesting, isn't it? We accept things by faith all the time. And there's so much evidence when it comes to this issue of evolution or creation. There's so much evidence. And you know what you'll find when you research the evidence? That when it comes to evolution, it's really not an issue of science versus religion. It's really not about religion versus science. You know what it's about? It's about science versus science. Because what you'll discover and what we're going to illustrate in the next few minutes is that natural and scientific law actually support creation more than they do evolution. When you look at the evidence, natural and scientific laws, it makes a whole lot much more sense when you look at those things and understand them. Oh, well, it makes so much more sense that God created the heavens and the earth. For instance, the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis says that life comes from pre-existing life. Living things come from living things. Now, evolution says that way back billions of years ago, there was this clump of non-living matter. And that over time, billions and billions of years, it somehow got its act together, came alive, and created life. Now, I'm not making fun and I'm not poking fun. I'm just telling you. Basically, the theory is this: that nothing plus a whole lot of time equals life. Except evolutionists all believe in the law of biogenesis. This is one of their natural and scientific laws. Yet the law of biogenesis says that's not possible. Nothing comes from nothing. Something don't even come from nothing. Something comes from something. Life gives way to life. And they say, oh, well, the reason that's true is because evolutionists will say the universe is eternal. It's always been here. But wait a second, there's another natural scientific law called the second law of thermodynamics. Remember studying the second law of thermodynamics says this, basically, that everything goes from a state of order to disorder. That everything starts out really good, and in time it just runs down until it just goes kaput. If you don't believe so, look in the mirror. I mean, things eventually are bagging and sagging and they've moved and you're like, no. I mean, it started out great. And we spent a lot of money to try to keep it that way, right? But everything goes from a state of order to disorder, which means, okay, this is a scientific law. All evolutionists believe in the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the universe has a defined amount of energy. That it had a beginning, and eventually, even though none of us will be around to see this, fortunately, it will have an end. That it started out this way with a certain amount of energy, and then it's going to run down and lose energy and eventually fade away to nothing. Second law of thermodynamics says the universe can't be eternal. So it couldn't have been around to create everything and to cause everything else. Basically, it's nothing plus time equals life. But there's another natural and scientific law that causes a problem for the evolutionary theory and supports creation. It's the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect says that every effect has to have a cause, right? We know this is true. Every effect has a cause. When I let go of this book and it drops and the law of gravity takes over, it happens because I choose to let go. I am the cause, and the effect is that it falls in response to the law of gravity. Every effect has to have a cause. But I want you to consider this. It's illogical, and it doesn't make any sense at all to assume that there can be an infinite series of causes. Now think about that. An infinite series of causes where this causes this, 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 on and on to infinity. That's illogical. Eventually, way back somewhere, there has to be something that already was that caused everything else.